Good morning. I would like to thank everyone for attending today's webinar presented by Jumpstart, Tips for Running a Successful Virtual Office. During today's webinar, panelists will be discussing how to communicate effectively with a 100% virtual team, how to set clear goals and keep employee engagement high while avoiding micromanagement, and how to help your team separate work life from home life when both are happening in the same space. I would like to ask our panelists to take a moment to introduce themselves, who they are, what they do, and why they chose to be involved in this webinar. Skylar, if you would honor us with going first to introduce yourself, I'd greatly appreciate it.
Thanks, John. My name is Skylar Norris, and I'm the Director of People at Air CFO. We are a fully remote tax, accounting, and finance firm. I've been working remotely for the last 6 years, and the main reason I decided to join this panel is because I really have a passion for teaching individuals how to level up as a remote employee, and more importantly, how to build and create culture amongst remote teams.
That's phenomenal. Thank you. Will, how about you? Could you go second?
I'm Will Lucas, CEO and founder at Creatio. It's a full-service production agency, and I'm also brand manager for Afrotech, which is the largest Black tech conference and digital platform in the world. And I lead a fully remote team of about 6 to 8 people, depending on where they are in our ecosystem, because the company's larger than just the Afrotech brand. But I'm very passionate about this subject because I believe the future of work is a lot different and accelerated to what we thought was going to happen with the progression of the future of work. But I believe that this new model may actually work out in our favor and in favor of a lot of companies who are trying to do innovative things.
Great. And Dan, how about you?
Hi, Dan Ernie with Jumpstart. I'm the Director of Entrepreneurial Talent. We have a combination remote, or as Skylar would call it, distributed team. So we have some people that are working fully remote and in different locations, never showing up in our location. We have people that do a combination of those modes, and then we have some that are a little bit more consistently in the office. Obviously, these days with COVID, most people are not in the office, but we're going to be quickly moving towards that. So I've got a long history of having a variation of different teams, working in environments where everybody is in an office, focused, working with each other, as well as people working around the world. So I'm passionate about how people work and how they work well to help kind of create a good culture for those people.
Phenomenal. Well, I'd like to thank you all for, of course, volunteering your time and your experiences today. The first question that I have here is for Skylar. So, Skylar, knowing that some professionals are dealing with work, being a student, and teaching their kids from home, are there any effective time management techniques that you can recommend?
Yes, great question, John. So this is something that our team is actually dealing with right now as well. Even though we've been a remote company, all of a sudden, as you said, there are children at home and spouses at home, and we're balancing a number of variables that we didn't have to deal with before. When I see companies go remote for the first time, they typically try to sort of recreate the connectivity that they have. And the way that they do this is sort of by overcompensating with Zoom meetings. And I see it happen a lot. And so all of a sudden you're working remotely and you wake up on Monday morning and you have 7 hours of Zoom calls. The problem with this is that we really need concrete, focused time to do deep quality work. So one of the things that I suggested to my team is this idea of bucketing your meetings into meeting days. This is especially helpful if you have, like we've talked about, all of these other variables in the airs. And so what I'm talking about is try and choose 2 to 3 days out of the week that you can bucket your Zoom or your Microsoft Teams or your Google Hangout calls into, so that you know going into your week, those 2 to 3 days, you're going to need to be present, look professional, be prepared to have meetings, and handle those. But it also gives you a few other days to work what I like to call asynchronously, where you don't have to commit necessarily to being on calls. it gives you a little bit more freedom in your day to deal with the other variables that you need and to provide some quiet, focused space for you. The other thing I always suggest is to think about your week in terms of projects. When someone goes remote for the first time, there's sort of this unconscious feeling of needing to be in your seat for 8 hours a day in order to feel present and to feel visible. That, again, it's not very realistic, especially with so many other nuances and things that you're handling. So think about your week instead in terms of projects. Choose 5 or 6 things that you want to accomplish in the week. Write those down and work towards those. And once you've completed them, consider your week finished. Bring it to a conclusion. Know that you've concretely handled the things that you want to without putting the pressure on yourself to be there 100% of the time. Thanks, John.
Yeah, phenomenal. Thank you so much for that response, Skylar. So the next question I have here is for Will. So considering everything really that's changing and that's really occurring right now in our society, Will, in your opinion, what will the future of work look like?
I want to piggyback a little bit on what Skylar mentioned. It's like, the measures of productivity will need to change in the future of work. So to this point of what used to be in the office, do I look like I'm working? Am I responding quickly enough to, your reach out, or am I actually getting work done? And so in my mind, it is more this concept of, again, bringing the office into home is not what's going to be the future of work. Is what am I best productive? And so it may not be the 8-hour concept that we traditionally, in our lifetimes have lived under, but that 8-hour concept is just a concept. It is not necessarily like the rule that has to be perpetuated. And so I really believe if you allow people to be adults and professionals, trust me to deliver my good work. Some people won't deliver, and that's an issue that you have to figure out for that particular individual. But again, it'll be about value and honest productivity. So when you allow me the freedom to get things done how I best get them done, I may deliver you something better than what you imagined in the first place, but I may be working at 8 o'clock at night versus 8 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah, it's phenomenal. Yeah, thank you so much for that, Will. And Dan, the next question here I have for you. So considering some of your experience and, leading a lot of remote teams in the past, what techniques have you utilized to really keep your team engaged and collaborative while working remotely?
Yeah, so I think, one of the key things that I've found works is actually works in the office quite well. But you definitely need to focus on this from a remote standpoint, is that you really need to be clear about what your goals are. If you have somebody that's working remotely and they can't, walk over and get clarification on certain things, and they don't know what they're striving for, what the cadence is of when they need to finish things, that's going to really, be detrimental for culture, and for people really feeling good about what they're doing and what they're working towards. And obviously, different companies have different types of cadences, and different positions have different types of cadences. So depending on what you're doing, that clarity needs to come through. Is it a daily type of a goal arrangement that you're looking for? Is it weekly? With our team, we talk more or less about what a results-oriented work environment, so ROW, and we really, focus in on what's the end goal that we're working towards, and how well can we do that. So right now we're in a extremely stressful time, right? So there's a lot of unknowns around us in our lives. How things are going to happen with school, how things are going to happen with if you have any seniors that are living with you, sharing with, or if you're just worried about them in general. There's just a ton of unknown. Having really good, succinct goals that you've realigned with the current environment, the expectations of the people that you're working with. We have a recruiting team, so we have 2 different main types of customers, candidates, and then our clients, where we're trying to help our clients find those candidates. So we've got to really kind of think about that. Clients often are used to being with us in person and being able to have a good feel for what's happening. Candidates are a little bit more used to us working with them on their schedule. So our team's a little bit more attuned with that. So working remotely and meeting them where they're at, and if it's a weekend or a lunchtime or an early time that we can talk to them, and it's via a conference call or a phone call, that kind of continues on. But we've just got this new added level of unknown all around this, and Skylar talked about it. We have different people kind of coming in and possibly adding to that stress, and we're managing new things. So I think empathy, beyond having the goals, you have to have the empathy around that to understand where people are at. Some people, it's that they have families and they have extended responsibilities. For other people, it's that they're by themselves all the time. They may not have a lot of support around them, or a lot of interaction, so you need to provide that. So you really need to have a good amount of empathy to understand where people are at.
I'd like to chime in on that a little, because he had a couple of really great points, and I really believe like this will be more of a leadership challenge than like the person working for you challenge, because I really if you've got good people, they will deliver you good work. But the issue in more cases, leadership wants to control all the variables, right? Especially if you're an entrepreneur and you've got a vision and et cetera. But if you've got good people, them being able to deliver you their best work is really the question. It's not necessarily are they doing the routine things every day that makes it, again, appear that they're pushing the ball forward. We're coming into a day, and Dan had a couple of really great points here, that it's more about the value you're providing versus, are you, to Skylar's point, sitting in front of your desk, or am I able to walk over to you, and et cetera. So I think we're moving into a more of a value-based work environment with what you're delivering. Does it actually push the ball forward versus are you sitting in front of your computer when I send you a Slack?
Great insight. Dan, thank you for answering the question. Will, thank you for that extra context there. I think that's really helping to shape, the really thought process around leadership and team members that are engaging from home. So, for those attendees out there, once again, if you do have any questions, please feel free to, put them in the chat box there, and we'll ensure that we can ask our panelists. So knowing that, not everyone has had an opportunity to be a remote team member before and are kind of being thrusted into this for the first time. Skylar, in your opinion, how help to build confidence and promote collaboration among team members that really have no experience working remotely?
That's a great question. So I'm going to break this one into two parts, actually, and I'm going to start with building confidence. We just talked about it, but first and foremost, lead with empathy. And that is the number one most important thing to getting your team to trust you. There needs to be safe space for failure. When you're leveling up as a remote employee for the first time, there are going to be challenges and failures. It is a completely different way of working for many, many people, and that needs to be okay. Failure needs to be okay. Support needs to be okay. We need to save space for people to have emotions. Secondly, we need to connect on a personal level. If you're a manager who's leveling up a team remotely for the first time, you're also struggling. Let your team know, connect with them on a personal level, and don't be afraid to own where you're also at. Remind them that this is a group effort and you're learning together. Build that culture, build that confidence within each other. Secondly, in terms of collaboration, collaboration requires everyone committing to working in the open. It's this idea of working in the open, working publicly, and working together. Use the tools that are available to you, whether your team is on Slack or Microsoft Teams, or you're using something like Trello or Asana. Use the tools available to you to publicize the work that you're doing. If you're a manager, share your work broadly with the team so that they can see that not only are you doing the things that you committed to, you're holding yourself accountable, and they'll follow suit. So to summarize a little bit, just make sure that your people know that their mental health and their well-being are your #1 priority. And then lead by example to create a collaborative culture by defaulting to working in the open. Thanks.
Phenomenal. Thank you, Scholar. And so, panel, I do have a question that came in from the audience. So I'd like to ask this to everyone on the panel here to see who would like to answer. How do you pull the team together to assign tasks without feeling like you're doing everything yourself?
I'm going to lean on Skylar a little bit for this because she's very tool oriented. We use something called Asana to manage projects. And once I put a task in Asana, this is a project management platform. And so when I put a task in Asana, I'm setting all the subtasks under that and delegating it to the right people who may be associated with those different things. So to me, and Skylar may have other thoughts here, but to me that sounds like a project management issue versus necessarily not just delegating or not just who's responsible, but it's can I communicate in a way that's effective so people know what their roles are.
Yeah, that's great. To build upon what Will said, there are a number of different things that you can do as a manager to ensure that things are working the way that they should. At our CFO, we do write quarterly OKRs, both as a leadership team, as managers, and then also departmentally. And we follow up on those OKRs each and every month to check in on progress. Now, what's important about assigning things, that word assigning, make sure that your people are bought in. Collaboration is important. So again, we sort of have to take this managerial hat off and step back and sort of think of ourselves as a flat org for the first time. You have to get people to buy into the project. It is a collaborative team effort. Your job as the manager is to ensure that things are happening as they should, but it's also your job as a manager to get people to buy in and to take on those tasks themselves. You can use project management tools like Asana. Google Sheets is fantastic. If you don't have a project management tool, you can assign, there's a little button where you can actually assign steps to people and they can resolve them. So as a manager, I would say, first, make sure that your team's bought into the project. Make sure that they understand why it's important and why it's a priority right now. Again, when people are dealing with the variables that we have, people need to understand, why are we doing this right now? When we're dealing with all of these other things, why is this important for me to do right now? Get them to buy in. And then give them the opportunity to take ownership of where they think they could be the most impactful. You can use tools to follow up on this. There's a number of tools out on the market. Find what works for your team. Some things work for certain individuals, others don't. But the more important part of that is to get people to take ownership of their own tasks and sort of internalize this idea of self-accountability, which you as the manager have to demonstrate first.
Awesome, phenomenal. Well, I'd like to thank the audience for that question, and Scholar and Will, thank you for your input there. So Will, the other question I have here is for you. So, what engaging activities do you feel managers can utilize to really help create an interpersonal, office-like feel while working remotely?
Yeah. So I want to challenge the premise is I don't want an office type feel within a work from home environment. I want to feel like we're walking into a new day. I mean, we're just being honest. There will be some parts of this whole scenario that go back to how it was, but they're largely this accelerated what was coming anyway. And so I just challenge the notion of the office, feel like we have to reevaluate what the office is, and if the office is the best scenario for the types of things that we're trying to get done in the marketplace. And so I think to come into what we're walking into, and a lot of this is still unknown. We don't know what tomorrow looks like and where the bottom is of this. We have assumptions, but we don't know. The best thing we can do as leaders is to be open to doing things differently than we thought we were going to be doing them on January 1st and even March 10th, right? And so I want to challenge everybody to reevaluate their core beliefs because a lot of those things are being challenged right now. Trying to hold people to a model that worked in an office at home is not going. We're going to set ourselves up for failure. And so you're going to get people coming behind you to close the door. You're going to get your kids, walking, running up to you while you're on a Zoom call or go to meeting call. That's just a reality. And so embrace it, so like, look, we're real people. And so we've always had this conversation, or at least as far as I've been in my professional career, have had this conversation about bringing your whole self to work. And people are like, well, okay, I'll bring you what I want you to see about my whole self to work, but we're really there now. And so I don't get offended anymore when my kids walk up and I'm on a Zoom call and they're in the screen. You get to know more about me as an individual, and that actually binds us together a little bit more stronger. So I look at this as an opportunity to actually embed those relationships a little bit more deeply.
Phenomenal, phenomenal. Great response there, Will. We do have another question here from the audience, and this question is for Dan. Dan, can you drill down on the empathy best practices you've used and have found to be productive?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think it's not super complicated, I would say, but I would say that we have with our team a keep it real mantra. So in the talent industry, we're dealing with people that are dealing with pretty critical life decisions that they need to make. So if you think about in life, you spend a lot of, if I talk about just money, you spend a lot of money on a house. It's a huge decision. You spend a lot of money on a car. It's a huge decision. You decide on a job. Well, you're not talking about spending money. You're talking about how you're making money. And in all of those, you mix in, okay, there's this cost and the money side of things. But then all of those are, do I love the car that I'm driving? Do I love the house that I live in? Do I love the job that I'm working in? So this keep it real mantra is we're dealing with people, business owners, as well as candidates that are making these critical decisions. And, so we've got to keep it real. And so it's being brutally honest about certain things. So if I were to say, if there's one thing, and this is just, when you're dealing with your team, if you expect them to do that, with the people that they're dealing with, then you've got to do that as well. And you've got to have a platform where you can do that. So you're going to have a mix of, here's the goal-oriented object or results metric-oriented things that we need to talk about that you need to do. There's a time and a space when we do that, and we get up and we say how we're going to do that. But then you're also breaking out a different time where you're talking and you're just talking about how are things going. How are things going at home? Oh, Carly, you're at home a lot right now, and you decided to build a chicken coop. This is a real story. She decided, so we talked for 20 minutes about what does a chicken coop take to put up in your yard, and Carly's going to be like, oh, great, Dan, you told everybody I'm building a chicken coop. But you know what? It's keeping it real and talking about things and creating those times and spaces. And we still have that. But we've always kind of had that. We've had to take, kind of the one-on-one process. We do it twice a week. And, it's an opportunity to just talk about, what's really affecting people. I think, those are kind of two things, being brutally honest about things and not sugarcoating, a situation. If we're to say, okay, the company is, going to be doing this and we need to change these things, to be honest about it so that people can make decisions and, have all the information they need to make those decisions. Some couple of things that we do.
Okay, phenomenal. I'd like to thank the audience for the question, and Dan, thank you for giving us that explanation and sharing those best practices. We did have another audience question that came in that I'd like to pose here to the panel. So brainstorming, of course, is a great way to collaboratively create problem solutions. So are there any tips that the panel can provide on how to best recreate when the workforce is remote?
Sure. So I'll jump in here. I love brain dumps. I love brainstorming. They're great. They're great items to have. But to Will's point, we have to start thinking about work a little bit differently. Those 2-hour sessions where we get in a boardroom and we sit together and we talk through things, They're just not productive in a remote environment anymore. Meetings are expensive. And so I'm going to pull in one of my favorite things, which is written asynchronous communication. You can have brainstorming sessions in a written format that allow people, and to be honest, I love written communication because it gives people time to truly be thoughtful. Brain dumps are great, but they're not always efficient because a lot of the time they're actually half thoughts. They're an idea without a follow-up or without context. And sometimes you don't get very far. You can take that same situation, give people a topic, give them time to brainstorm, and then default to written asynchronous communication. One of the things I like to do with my team is create a document. I'll raise an idea and say, this is what I want to do. Here's what I'm thinking. Let's get your thoughts as well. And give people 2 to 3 days to come up with their written responses. Then you have this wonderful opportunity to review all of that feedback, and everyone else in the room gets to review the feedback, then meet. That 2-hour meeting just became a 15-minute meeting where you're going to decide on a solution and path forward, because everyone already has the information. Everyone's already had a chance to write out what they think, and everyone's already had a chance to internalize what solutions they might want to have. Secondly, I do want to bring up this idea of solution-based problem solving. Brain dumps are wonderful, but brain dumps often end up with a lot of ideas and a lot of people talking about why that idea won't work. Very few times in brain dumps do we come up with solutions. So in a remote team, and especially, you know, in my remote teams, I like to tell people to think of it as solution-based problem solving. If you're going to raise an idea, if you're going to bring an idea to the table, if you're going to bring a problem to the table, have a solution that comes with it. That way, when we get together for that very expensive meeting that we're going to have, we cut our time in half and we're working productively towards a roadmap or a solution. That's one tactic that I personally love for my team and I found to be very effective.
Phenomenal. Yeah, thank you so much, Skylar. I appreciate that. So we do have another question here from the audience that came in. So the conversation is largely on project-driven work. You know, how do you lead a team that has to produce 60 digital widgets per day or 10 times returns or whatever? You know, I think in reality, you know, what this question is really going through is, you know, how do you remotely lead a team that has repetitive daily goals? So team members in a very goal-driven environment, how do you ensure that you're able to lead that team to be able to be effective to hit these daily goals?
I can jump in on that. So, you know, my team is, we've got a combination of longer term goals that we look at, and there's a lot of undefined work, but there's also some very defined work towards getting to those goals, but it's not quite as structured and linear. So if one thing happens, the next person can do their job, they can do their job. It's a little bit more, you're constantly keeping an eye out and a feel out for, you know, things that might be able to move forwards, but you can't control exactly how that works on a daily basis for sure. But I used to be in an environment where we tried to do that. When I was actually in an office environment where we would do stand-ups on a daily basis twice. Talk about it in the morning, talk about what we needed to accomplish for the day, review it at the end of the day, talk about how it went, and we were doing that. That was, I gotta admit, so I always look for pros and cons and everything. There's cons to doing that. You know, you're talking, you think about at the end of the day, you're talking about how did I do, you know, and presenting to the rest of the team, how did we do? And then you get up in the morning like, okay, I'm repeating myself. You know, what did we talk about, and how do we do that? But if it's critical that you're getting metrics, getting activity done, you probably want to do that. We could be doing that. We could be doing the same thing on a remote basis and having these team meetings. It just doesn't work for us and for what how our work mode is. Now, you know, that's you know, my take on it is we've spread it out and we get back to, we know what the result is we're looking for, but we want to look for it on a weekly basis, and we review that stuff on a weekly basis. And
I'd like to piggyback on that, Dan. I actually have a team that does have consistent goals, not necessarily daily, but we do have certain metrics that we have to meet. So One of idea I'd like to pose to the audience is 9 to 5 doesn't exist in the remote world anymore. If your expectation of your team is that they're going to create a certain number of, and I'm getting a little bit of feedback here from someone, but if your expectation of your team is that they're going to produce a certain amount, like they were in an office between the hours of 9 to 5, let it go. The benefit of remote work is that people get to work when and how it works best for them. You can keep clear goals, you can keep expectations high, but the difference is you have to be flexible in allowing people to meet those expectations in the way that works best for them. If they have to create a certain number of things, that's fine, but let it be okay for them to do it at 10 p.m. if that's what works for them, especially in today's climate. You have parents that are balancing trying to make dinner and also be an educator. We have spouses that are trying to share computers and balance calls. You have to change your expectations of how people are working, not their output, not the expectation of the output, but you have to change your expectation of how and when they're going to get that work done and allow it to work for them.
I want to add maybe 2 or 3 sentences on, because these are really, really good points. But to the question, I really think we do ourselves a disservice if we think that this just works project-based. Like, this is a reevaluation of how we do business, whether it is we have tasks that need to be done every day. Maybe we need to challenge our core assumptions on how it needs to be done. It could be automated. Maybe, we can set a task that pings us every day. It needs to be done by X time. And to Skylar's point, as long as I get it done on time, it's done. So I think one of the words she used previously, which I think can be like, people need to lead with this theme of like asynchronous. Things are not going to be done the way they were done in an office before, in this environment where we will all live at the same time. I have this firm belief in set the meetings. Okay, I'm going to show up to the meeting and then set the due date and let me figure out the rest.
It's phenomenal. Yeah, I'd like to thank the audience for the question. I'd like to thank the panelists for all chiming in. I do have another question for all of the panelists here. Skylar, I'll pose it to you first, and then we can let Will and Dave both take a crack at it. So considering we are in a remote environment, communication is so vital to our work and our success in terms of team collaboration. Why is over communication so impactful in a virtual environment?
I love this term, over communication. Over communication goes hand in hand with asynchronous communication. So when you're in an office and you're sitting there having we call it water cooler conversation, there's a lot of organic information that passes from individuals. If you try and recreate that virtually, you're going to end up with what I call the back and forth factor. A question's asked, 3 hours later, somebody responds. 3 hours later, the next person responds. Suddenly, something that should have taken this long has taken 2 days. So when we over communicate, we take on the assumption that no one has any idea what we're talking about. When I send an email to my team member, I assume they have no idea what I'm talking about. And that means that in that body of that email, I include all of the context. Here's what I'm talking about. Here's the data I've done to support this. Here's my solutions I'd like. And here are the 3 feedback points I'd like from you. Your emails might start to look, and I know mine do, 2 or 3 pages long. And there used to be this concept that if an email had more than 3 lines, no one was going to read it. Let it go. That doesn't work in the remote world. Your emails are going to be long because they're going to include significant context that people need in order to answer your question. Make sure that the individual has all of the information that they need in order to provide you with an educated response. So it's going to feel like you're giving people way too much context and you're over talking, but it's actually incredibly important. And it's even more important to learn to do it well in a written format, because once again, getting on a call, meetings are expensive. You want to give people time to think through this. And when you're working as a remote org and you're embracing this idea that you're letting people work when and how they want, you can't expect to send an email at 1 p.m. and get a response the same day. You have to expect that people will respond when they're able to. So that's the reason that you have to over communicate your needs and your information.
Yeah, I think we may have to get to a place where like we reevaluate email etiquette in this world. I mean, to her point of emails are going to get long. So, and if I'm sending emails back and forth, do I always need the, hey, how you doing? Hope everybody's okay. That just adds a lot of things to the flavor of an email that may not be necessary. To me, I'm more like, give me the context. What are my action items? Really it. I need to know it clearly. What is it I need to do based on this email? What is it I need to know? And so all the extra fluff that is not core to the context and understanding what this project is or this deliverable is or what this thing is, we're going to find out who are really good communicators, and people who may not be really skilled are going to have to step it up, because this is going to be about a new world of, and even the leaders here, you may think you're a good communicator. We're about to find out, so can people, you got good people, can they give you back what you asked for? You'll find out maybe you didn't describe it the way that you actually meant it. And sometimes that may mean getting on a call and explaining the context and then sending the action items in an email. But if, again, if you haven't written it down, in my words, like if there's no Instagram picture, it didn't happen, right? And so, I think you do need that CYA, that cover your file. Like, I sent this in an email. This is what I'm doing. This is what I asked for. And so please give me back that. If I didn't give you what you asked for, either there was a problem with the way I communicated with what I needed, or there may be a different issue with how you're receiving what
I'd like to chime in on that too. So I think, with this new world, and, Will and Scholar pointed out that it's new to a lot of people. So the last question was asking, how do I deal with people that on a daily basis I could, really manage them closely and tightly, and, and it's not project oriented. And, so I'm assuming there's a combination of, all right, I'll send a quick email, or I'll just walk over and talk to them, quick emails. So, agreeing with, with what's been said here, you have to have context. When you're emailing, you have to have a lot of context so people know where you're coming from, why you're sending an email, what the action items are that are requested. Even with that, though, I would say, and there, as has been stated, some people just are not great communicators when it comes to that. You're going to need to have a mode and a way of saying, okay, this is not doing it for me, and you can't have emails going back and forth. But I'll add to that. I can't. There's no discussion that should ever happen with emails back and forth. Talk about losing the point of something. You got to get on a chat, or you got to get on a phone, and you got to have a conversation, and that takes the place of walking over to somebody's desk to clarify something. And you got to get, when you get on the chat, or you do a conference, let's say, it's going to be even better, because you're going to see facial expressions. You're going to see everything. It's not the real thing, but it's much closer than the alternative, which is just a bunch of text that you can't really read through. So turn your video on is the point there. Turn the video on, let people see you when you're talking to them over a conference.
Yeah, and it may be sometimes as simple as, now explain back to me what I asked for.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So I gave you these instructions. I saw your facial expressions. I think you got it, right? Now please explain it back to me. What are you walking away with? What are your to-do items based on our conversation today? And then you'll get clear if they understand.
Right.
Very true. Yeah, phenomenal. I'd like to thank the panel for all chiming in on that question there. And for the audience, once again, if any questions do come to mind, please don't hesitate to submit them via chat, and we'll make sure that the panelists are asked. So I do have another question for all of the panelists, and I'd like the Will to go ahead and start leading us off with his response here. So Will, what are some ways team members can achieve high productivity in a virtual environment?
Yes, so there's a lot of ways. So I'll start with, there's a concept of having really good people who want to do good work in the first place. And so if you have people who want to do good work, and you empower them with the tools they need to do that good work, you have to trust them to do it. And you have to, and again, to use Skylar's word, is to be comfortable with asynchronous, communication, to be comfortable that I may not be sitting in front of my computer when you sent me that email that I got to respond to in 5 minutes, or you think I'm not working. And so we really have to honestly reevaluate what we really need and when do we really need it. And so, it's, you know, I treat my Slack messages. So Slack is it's kind of like a chat platform, but for people who aren't familiar with it, maybe Skylar has a better definition of it. I would appreciate that. But I use Slack kind of like I use text messages. If I send you a text, in my mind, I'm hoping to get a response relatively quickly. If I send you an email, then I probably don't need a response right now. And so I think that we have to really think about the tools that we use. And while we're allowing people to work naturally in their best way, think about, what do I really need? When do I really need it? When do I really need it? Not when do I really want it, but when do I really need it? And because again, we have accepted this 8:30 to 4:30, you know, concept for the last, or 9 to 5 if that's your job. So we've accepted that for the last 30, 40 years, maybe. But again, that's something that we've just accepted. And so there are people who work 12-hour shifts. There are people who work 3 days on, 2 days off. And so we have to really think about, what is the best thing for our situation? The feedback that we're giving today won't work for everybody that's viewing on this call, but the goal is that you take 2, 3, maybe 4 points away from this that help you in your model, and then you eat the fish and spit out the bones, right? So you have to figure out, number one, do you have the right people in the right seats on the bus? And then how you have to learn how they best communicate, what are their skills and weaknesses, and et cetera. And then build your model based on that. And so if you've got good people and you give them the resources and they want to do good work, they will deliver you good work. If they don't, again, everybody won't survive in this model, and they'll have to do something else. And we have to be okay with that, because it's a new day and it's unprecedented for everybody here.
I think Will absolutely hit the nail on the head with having the right people in the right seats. You have to have people bought in. If you do not have a mission or a vision statement that your people are not bought into, it really doesn't matter what you do, you're not going to retain those individuals. People stay and they work for missions that they believe in. And that is a huge aspect of culture, starting with your culture. You need to create an environment that people want to be loyal to first and foremost. You need to give people access to things that help them work the way they work best. In terms of productivity, there are a number of different tools and ways to keep people on track. You can assign OKRs each quarter. You can create project roadmaps. You can use project roadmap tools. You can even have daily check-ins if you want, if that's how you want to track work and ensure that people are on track. But I think the more important aspect of it is what Will said, is having the right people in the right seats. If you have that, you're going to have people that are willing to work and work hard, because here's the reality of remote work. Some days you're going to have a lot to do. You're going to work 12 hours, you're going to grind, you're going to get off feeling like you still have a ton to do. Some days you're going to have 3 to 4 hours and then you're done for the day. And that's just the reality of how remote work happens. It's productivity based no matter what. It's about giving people the tools and giving them personally something to work towards. You have to give people something to be motivated about. And if you can't give them, for whatever reason, the market salary that they want or the benefits package that they want, remote work, I don't consider remote work to be a benefit anymore. This is the future of work. This is how we're working. It's not a benefit. It is how we're working. So give people something else to connect with. And that is your vision, your mission, and your culture. And when those shine through, people are going to work hard for you because they're going to feel connected to what you're doing. And it's not going to be about the other nuances that they stick with. It's not going to be about the paycheck. It's not going to be about the benefits package. It's going to be about them wanting to see your vision realized and being willing to work hard for that.
Phenomenal. Okay.
I was just going to say, critical that people have a connection to what the end game is and what the goals are of the organization, and they understand how they have impact. And so we've got a new world here, and there's some people that are kind of doing the same thing, but maybe they're doing it at a heightened level. Some of them are doing a brand new thing. And as managers, you've got to understand, if they were great performers in a different mode, they can be great performers in this mode, but you've got to understand what they do well. There's going to be overachievers that you're going to have to say, you know what, you can't be working 18 hours. You need to take time to do stuff for yourself. You need to pay attention to your family. If you have other people that are You think about, team sports versus individual sports. Some people are, they're team sports people. They're not golfers. They don't practice well on their own. They need a team environment, which is kind of why the office scenario, kind of works for them, because they're energized by the people around them doing the work. So you've got to figure out a way to give them that energy back if that's what they need. And or it's, Skylar and Will said, it's a new day. They've got to figure it out, but you've also got to try to identify it with them and help them, figure out where they're going to get that energy and how you're going to be able to give it to them if you can help them in any way.
Phenomenal. Yeah, thank you all for taking the opportunity to all chime in on that question. We do have another question here from the audience that I'd like to ask. Skylar, I'd like to ask this question to you specifically. So, what are some of your favorite techniques that you take advantage of or utilize to promote team building in the virtual setting?
Sure. So there are a number of, there are a number of things that you can do to sort of build camaraderie and this sense of community. First of all, if your team itself, not your organization should absolutely at least have a monthly all hands where you can connect and see each other's faces. But if your team isn't meeting once a week, you're missing an opportunity to create a sense of community there, to get everyone in a room for 30 minutes to an hour just to check in. In terms of building an organization-wide, your culture starts with the culture. What are you doing? What are you offering to your employees outside of just work? Are you doing things like virtual happy hours? Do you have a book club? Do you have a women's only channel or a people of color channel or a diversity channel? What are you doing to address each and every one of the different types of people in your organization and to give them a space to feel a sense of community? So whatever it is that you choose to do, that your organization chooses to do, I would start by asking your people what they want, because they're the ones who are going to tell you exactly what they need. Send out a survey. What would you guys like to see from us? Would you like to see virtual happy hours? Would you like to have something like a book club? Should we have a team-wide workout session? I think I saw some organization do that. Ask your people. Don't make assumptions about what they need. Let them tell you what their needs are and then build it around them, and make sure that you hear all of the voices of your people and that you create a sense of community for each and every one of them in some way.
Really good.
Well, so I do have another question for all of you. We've had a lot of opportunity throughout this webinar to speak about holding the team members accountable, really fostering productivity, ensuring that we could get team members to collaborate. But this question is really going to touch on supporting the team members and the team members themselves. So how, in you all's opinion, can managers help their teams feel supported and remain focused during such a stressful time? Dan, I'd love for you to start us off.
Sure, and I think I've probably touched on this a little bit in my my rant so far in the early stages there, but I think it goes back to kind of the keep it real mantra, the asking difficult questions, telling difficult truths, and trying to get to that point where you can have those open conversations. And if people, again, and it goes back to the unknowns, if they have unknowns, and we've got some stress that we can't control. There's unknowns we can't control. But if you can get to, by conversation, understanding what those unknowns are, understanding for them, and what you can help. And I think, to Skylar's point as well, ask them, what is it that we can do? What can I do personally? Right? There's things I think I can do, but let's have a conversation. What could I do to help you? And I think that it's critically important that you're having an opportunity for somebody to voice openly, really what they're feeling. It's not easy to do always.
Yeah, I love what you said there, Dan. So I think, are you really somebody who they believe has their best interest in mind? That's really what it comes down to. If they believe that you care about their career progression, their longevity, their ability to thrive, then they will come to you if they don't feel supported, number one. But if they have questions and they don't feel safe to come to the person who, you know, they may be reporting to, then they won't feel supported in that way. So, I mean, and the only way to build that kind of trust is to be a real person yourself. So, you know, if I'm having a conversation and I see Dan's got this, you know, thing on his wall certificate, I want to, you know, hey, you know, where'd you go to school? And, you know, look at what, you know, look at where I went to school. So I think, you know, just allowing people in and making them feel safe because you're opening up also, you really create a different level. I honestly believe that this moment is a resetting for stuff. We built on a lot of junk, you know, in our business models and, you know, the way we do things. And this moment is a chance to reevaluate the assumptions that we built since the last time this happened, you know, 100 years ago or whatever. So if we can figure out ways to rethink the model of leadership and our relationship to the people who may report to us, and let them in, be honest, be a real person, talk about things that may not always have to do with work. So if, you know, to Skyra's point, if we've got a book club going on, then the leaders should probably be in the clubs that resonate with them. And they should not, it's not just for my people, right? It's for me to engage in also. So many times, and I've worked in corporate environments, you know, where you have employee engagement, you know, events, and nobody in leadership is there. It's about them, and I'm like, yo, like this is not for real, you know, because if this is really about employee engagement, then like, oh, we're in this together, and so I need to feel like I'm in this ship with you. You may be steering the ship, but are we in this together? And I think that that's a really great way to make people feel supported when they believe that you've got their best interest in mind.
And I'll just bring this to a conclusion on my end. If you're a manager that's working remotely, some quick tips to actually execute on these things. You should be meeting with your team once a week. You should have a one-to-one with your people at least once a week. You should be starting that meeting by checking in on them. How are you? What's going on? Is there anything you need to talk about this week? How are you feeling right now in the midst of this climate? How are you feeling? Talk about that first. Do not start your one-to-one meetings by jumping in on where you are in projects. But if you want to keep people focused, lead with empathy, start checking on them. Once you have talked through that and you've had a chance, then go into your focused work. Amazing, wonderful. Let's talk about where we're at this week with our work. That's how you have a conversation where you touch on the individual and you keep the focus as well. It's a productive conversation, but the important aspect is that the people know that they're supported.
Phenomenal. Thank you, panel, for all chiming in on that question. I know we're approaching the 11 o'clock hour here, but we do have another question from the audience. So, and this question is for the panel. So do the panelists have any recommendations for educational resources to help micromanagers quickly learn project management?
Yes.
Take Rome in, that's what I say.
Micromanagement, there's no place for it in a remote environment. It wastes everyone's time. It wastes the employee's time and the manager's time, and it's not productive. We know this. So nobody likes to work with a micromanager. There are some exceptional resources out there on how to help level up your managers. One of my favorite groups is called Life Labs Learning. I'm a huge fan of their work, and they offer online remote courses for managers to take to learn about things like how to have one-to-one sessions where you're not micromanaging and how to have effective one-to-ones. So if you're in a situation where you have, and this often happens if you're in a startup, you probably have young management because that's just how things work in startup land. So if that's you, take advantage of those resources like Life Labs Learning, offer them to your team, give them a chance to hear and to learn about other methodologies. And the reason that I like those is because they're done in a remote setting from the get-go. In-office training and remote training, they're completely different. So use that resource if you can. It's one of my favorite.
Awesome. That will wrap up today's webinar. I'd like to thank all of our panelists for participating and volunteering their time today. If you do have any questions, please feel free to try to touch out and reach out to us. Everyone have a beautiful rest of your day.